Hi there, my name's Eric Francis Coppolino, the editor of Planet Waves and the New York Daily News astrologer, and I'm here with the first video in the Art of Becoming series of videos, which will cover Saturn. Like you, I am eager to move on to Chiron, but one thing I have learned from my long experience covering Saturn and the Centaurs is that it is better to start with Saturn and then move on to the Centaur. So for the love of Saturn, here in the time of Saturnalia, I'm not sure it's exactly Saturnalia, but it's pretty close. The Sun is in Capricorn and Saturn's in Capricorn. Let's talk a little bit about Saturn, and additionally Saturn in Capricorn in particular, and then a little bit about Saturn through the signs in what are called the quadrature alignments. That is to say, when Saturn enters a cardinal sign, which it has just done. Okay, so Saturn is the furthest traditional planet from the Sun. It was not discovered. It could always be seen. So like caveman and cave lady could see it moving through the sky. So it doesn't get a minor planet number, unlike most things. It's a traditional planet and a very useful planet, one of the most misunderstood by astrology, and in a sense misused because it is misunderstood. I was shopping yesterday on my Facebook page for intelligent astrology writing. I asked for some intelligent astrology writing because I want to see some examples of what else might be out there. And someone sent me a sample of analysis by a very well-known writer who delineated Saturn beautifully, except for the single one most important thing about Saturn, which is that Saturn represents the authority principle. The concept of authority, a very important concept right now as we live in these verging on authoritarian times, and we all are in this position where we have to take a lot of responsibility for ourselves and for our lives. This whole gig economy thing that we are now getting used to, that is to say, the long predicted idea that jobs are going out of style. That's what the gig economy means, that we just go from gig to gig and we don't really have a job or a place to go to work. We might work in an environment more like this. Well, the whole gig economy thing requires that we take responsibility for not just the content of the work that we do, but for the structure of the work that we do, which is to say, not just showing up and being the content of a desk and a workroom, but also making the desk and the workroom. And that's the Saturn piece. And another aspect of Saturn is showing up on time and being dependable, which is an internalized guidance system. It's about being your own boss, basically, and making sure that you're the person who is the authority in your life. And so the authority principle concept of Saturn works a couple of different ways. One of the ways it works is typically it is projected outside of ourselves. There is a parent, there is a boss, it can be a spouse, it can be a policeman, it can be some other authority figure who enters our lives to keep us in line. And in extreme cases, and sometimes not so extreme cases, when people go out of line and act in ways that are inappropriate or illegal or manage to offend someone, the Saturnian, the exoskeleton, the external system of Saturn has to hold them in place and drag them through court and maybe put them in jail in a little box, which is very Saturnian because it's a container, it's a structure. And in a more balanced person, in a healthier person who is more self-regulated, let's say, which is a form of psychological health, you have bones and you have skin, and your bones hold you up from the inside, and you internalize that Saturn concept, and you kind of introject or become the Saturn structure that most other people need to be imposed on them from the outside. So with Saturn, there's this process as we go through the journey of growing up, mainly. One of the most important elements of growing up is learning self-regulation and the ability to gradually become your own authority so that you don't have to have other people telling you what to do all the time. Now, this can go to a much further extreme, what Sigmund Freud called the superego, which he viewed as an internalization of the father, which is an internal regulatory device that basically rains on your parade all the time and says, well, don't do that because it's going to be inappropriate. Don't do that because of that. Don't have sex with that person because she's too young and you're too old. Don't do that because it's too much fun. You should feel guilty about that. This is the overcooked Saturn principle. It's gone a little bit too far, and it has become this overdone superego, basically. Now, Saturn in Capricorn has some interesting overtones because there's something about both Saturn and Capricorn that are involved with the family, and the family is one of the main places that we get our initial kind of internalized authority complex, and we deal with these people who become the models of authority figures in our lives, and we tend to recreate this over and over again if we haven't resolved these family issues. And Saturn in Capricorn is one of many factors that are reminding us of the connection between our early family life, our current family life, and the structures of society that are involved in this process of wielding authority over us. And I think that we do need to be careful with this, and we need to pay attention to this whole issue of authority before authority gets to the point where it is completely overdone. And one of the problems we have is we live in a world where most people don't want to take responsibility for their time, for their money, for their energy, for their creativity, for the structure of their lives, for the sense of purpose that guides us, and we tend to rely on external. So this is the kind of edge that we walk with Saturn, and the overarching message of Saturn in Capricorn is going to be to understand the relationship between family life in the past, family life presently, and the implements of society, including all of the psychology of authority. Right? Most of what I'm talking about is psychological in nature, not so much physical in nature. I mean, the psychology of an abusive family almost always includes a door that is unlocked from the inside. You can walk out the door. So it's not as if there is an actual prison other than a conceptual prison, a prison of the mind. And so in many ways, the Saturn principle is internalized as an entirely psychological principle, but it is a very practical form of psychology that involves, for example, the ability to maintain your life on an approximate schedule, or where necessary, a precise schedule to get to the airport. Someone who consistently misses flights and misses trains could be said to have Saturn issues because they can't organize themselves sufficiently to show up at the airport on time and fulfill that minimal bit of structure and they'd probably be better driving in a car. But when you get on the highway and you drive a car and the speed limit is 65, you have to know how fast you can go before you're going to get a speeding ticket. You have to have your own speed limit. That all said, let's take a look at a chart involving Saturn. Now, I'm not sure if this chart's a little too complex for what we're doing here. However, I'll explain the bits to it. So this is my chart explaining Saturn. The most important thing we can say about Saturn and Capricorn, and that there is Saturn, and that there is Capricorn, and this chart here is set for January of 2020. The entire Saturn and Capricorn process is pointing to an event horizon in January 2020, the year of the next presidential election. So we'll be hearing a lot about the presidential election in that year, but the entire year is going to be shaped by, by the events of January 2020. And there is, let's say, a lot of energy contained in that time frame, that approximate time frame, the winter of late 2019 into 2020, and then in particular in an event in January 2020. So take a look at what is going on here. This conjunction contains the Sun, Pluto, Saturn, Mercury, and Ceres. The big event is the Saturn-Pluto conjunction of January 2020. That's Saturn, that's Pluto. Remember that Saturn and Pluto take, Saturn takes 27 years to go around the zodiac. Pluto takes 250 years to go around the zodiac. They make a conjunction about every 40 years, and the last conjunction was in Libra, right at the dawn of the neoconservative movement, when Ronald Reagan took office as the first Republican president after Richard Nixon. Remembering that Republicans never get into office honestly. I say this as a historical fact and not as some political bias. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. But what I can tell you is that that there's always some element of cheating involved, and Reagan's cheating was to cut a deal with the Ayatollah Khomeini, who was holding hostages in Iran at the end of the Carter administration, and make sure that the Ayatollah Khomeini kept the hostages in through the election, promising that they would have all the weapons they needed in their war against our allies, the Iraqis. So that was during the Iran-Iraq War. And we were providing weapons to Iraq because they were our allies. And then Reagan and Bush made a deal with the Iranians to keep the hostages in. And the deal was, keep them in, let them out once we're in office, and we'll give you all the weapons that you need in your war against our allies, the Iraqis. Our allies, the Iraqis. That became known as the Iran-Contra scandal. If you look that up in Wikipedia, it was a pretty serious thing. Not as serious as what we have going on now, but it was the latest chapter in this kind of gradual political overthrow of the United States. Now, this conjunction is a very, very powerful conjunction, and by the way, the largest planet, Jupiter, is located right here. It's, you know, in a chart it'll be right up here. I didn't want to confuse matters, but Jupiter is at 9 degrees, and these are between 21 and 23 degrees. So Jupiter is going to enter this conjunction a little bit later in the year, and then Saturn and Jupiter will form their exact conjunction in 2021 in Aquarius. Okay, so my point here is that if it feels like this is all building towards something, right? If that's the feeling that we have, and there is that feeling in the air, this is all building towards something. We have a picture of what it's building toward. There is a thing on the event horizon that is about to happen very soon, in just 2 years from now, one little teeny Mars cycle away. This is going to happen. And one thing to bear in mind is that this event, in a sense, is contained in all of us, because the astrological clocks, there is only one of them, and we had contained an internal one based on the time that we jumped onto the planet, and we like entered the cycle, the multiple cycles. And it means a little bit different something for everyone, but the truth is that we contain this event, and we're going to experience it as both an internal event using the internal authority concept of Saturn, and as an external event using the external authority concept of Saturn. But the thing to remember is that Saturn in Capricorn is building toward something. And that something will be in January of 2020. And my sense is that we will mediate this. We will experience this collectively on the level of how well we have done internalizing the Saturn principle. What is it? What are we willing to take charge of in our lives? Are we willing to work together? Remember that Saturn doesn't just rule Capricorn. Saturn also rules Aquarius. I know that most astrologers think that Uranus rules Aquarius, but that's a relatively late arrival in 1781, and only one astrologer, Raphael I, proposed that that Uranus ruled Aquarius, and that doesn't change 2,000 years of astrological history and the development of the meanings of these points. And my point is that Saturn, in its association with Aquarius, where it is headed next after it makes this conjunction, is about the structure of groups and our ability to work together as a collective. We might be thinking right now here in early 2018 that we face a problem that is too big for any one of us to solve, and we don't know how we're going to solve it. And we've got this guy in office who just continues to do one absolutely outrageous thing after the next. And that's correct. No one individual can do anything. I can't make this video alone. I look like I'm sitting here alone, but there's 10 people around the world who are making sure that all the infrastructure of this happens. This video, me sitting here by myself, I drew this chart, and with a pen I walked down the block to the store to buy at the art supply store. Actually, behind the scenes, there are many people involved, and so nothing happens, or exceedingly little happens, with just the effort of one person. And one of the messages of Saturn is we have to learn how to work in collectives. All right, here are a few more details from this chart. One really exciting feature in this chart is that this whole group between 21 and 23 degrees of Capricorn, including 2 slow movers and 3 quick movers, the slow movers being Saturn and Pluto, and the mere mention of Saturn-Pluto conjunction should make everyone perk up to attention and think, wow, that's something. That whatever that is something, and it is. So the Saturn-Pluto conjunction is being joined by Mercury, making sure that we get the message. Ceres, which has a lot to do with food, and this is one of the most important issues of our time, as the planet heats up and the aquifer is pumped out of California, which is still not getting any rain, and the whole damn place is burning up in the warm weather, and probably still burning as I'm sitting here speaking. And the sun, just to make sure we have a concept of right now and it aligns, and where there's the sun, the earth is in the opposite position. Let's just draw the earth in to make sure that we can see that the earth is actually in there. I put it in blue because it's blue, and it's a circle with a little plus, different than the part of fortune, which is tilted. So this isn't, the sun and the earth are always in an exact opposition in astrology, though it's not typical to put the earth into an astrology chart. Interesting thing, isn't it, that the planet we live on doesn't get put into the chart. All right, so here's the point I'm getting at in a very roundabout way. This here is Eris. That's the proper way to pronounce it, with a long S at the end. And Eris, discovered in 2005 by Mike Brown and Chad Trujillo and Dave Rabinowitz, caused a big fuss in astrology, and it is the vitally important planet that almost no one is talking about. We are in the age of major planetary discoveries happening on a regular basis, and a major super important planetary discovery of Eris that only happened, what's 2018? That was 2005. 13 years ago, Eris was named. 12 years ago, in the summer of 2006, Pluto was demoted and turned into a dwarf planet, along with Ceres. And so, by the way, we have an alignment of the three original dwarf planets: Pluto, Ceres, and Eris, and Haumea, currently a dwarf planet. Just put a little H into the chart. A very distant, approximately 300-year orbit, dwarf planet. That's Uranus. Let's put it in just as an ordinary H. Is located right opposite Eris. So this is a major alignment. Something is up with this. There is some extraordinary change that will happen. To give another example, and sadly a negative one, the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto follows the opposition of Saturn and Pluto. Kind of like you have a full moon, and then 2 weeks later you have a new moon, and then 2 weeks later you have a full moon. Only with Saturn and Pluto, it's not 2 weeks. It's about, how long between 2001, from 2001 to 2020, 20 years. It was easy to calculate. Approximately 20 years between full phase Saturn opposite Pluto, right to the blue line there, and then Saturn conjunct Pluto. Saturn was opposite Pluto in the summer of 2001 and a little bit in 2002. That was the 9/11 incident. This opposition is the 9/11 incident. It was exact within days of the presidential daily brief, CIA PDB, wherein Bush was warned that Osama bin Laden is going to determine to strike in the United States. That document, the presidential daily brief of August 6th, 2001, followed by one day the Saturn-Pluto opposition of August 5th, 2001. Now, approximately 18 years later, Saturn and Pluto are in the same place. This is the new moon conjunction of Saturn and Pluto. So what we have here is closure on the whole cycle of events that were precipitated by the 2001, the 9/11 2001 incident. This is reason to pay attention, and it's reason to use the gift of astrology to raise our awareness and know what we might do to shape future events in some way. So I'm not predicting that there's going to be some massive cataclysm, except I will tell you that this one very easily seen interpretation of this chart is something like that. But it won't be so if we pay attention and start making decisions. All right, a few minutes left. I don't want to go too long on this video, but let's include one more personal factor that overlaps a little bit with history, because one of the ways that we work with astrology in a more, let's say, intellectually rational way is to look at the structure of time, which is particularly important with Saturn. So let's take Pluto out of the picture for a second and just use the cycles of Saturn. Here we have Saturn in Capricorn. Saturn last entered Capricorn in 1959, 1989, and 1989. It stays in a sign for 2.5 years approximately. So add 2.5 to 3 years on to 59 and 89, and you'll have the years that Saturn was in Capricorn. For those who were born in 59, 60, 61, that is you having your second Saturn return. For those who were born in 89, 90, 91, you're having your first Saturn return, which is basically another way of saying millennials reaching middle age. Pay attention. Okay, going back one quad alignment, 90 degrees, quadrature alignment. Saturn entered Libra in 81. Most recently, and before that, in 1951. So if you're born in 8123 or 5123, you're having a Saturn square. Prior to that, Saturn entered Cancer in 2003 and in 1974. So if you're born in 2003, 4, 5, or you're born in 74, 5, 6, approximately, you're having a Saturn opposition. That's like a little mini Saturn return. It's particularly important in the lives of people around the age of 14, because it's a time in life when you are, becoming a young adult. You can be a Boy Scout when you're 14. Age 12 and 13 or something, you're in the Webelos, and when you're 14 through 18, you can be a full-on Boy Scout. And then 18 has no particular astrological resonance, but 14 is an important step toward adulthood. For most people, high school begins. There's more serious expectations put on people, and you kind of have to do your job in most high schools. Would not want to be in one today. All right, let's go back to when Saturn entered Aries. That was 1967 and 1996. So if you're born in 67, 8, 9, or 1996, 7, 8, you are having your Saturn square. So all of these quad alignments of Saturn, quadrature alignments, meaning that they're on a 90-degree kind of axis, are important steps on the way to adulthood. And in addition, if you have Saturn in one of those positions, or if you're born under a cardinal sign, Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, you have a resonance with these other time frames, with these time periods. And that is just it's like a checkpoint. I mean, one of the ways to use astrology is to claim to be predictive. Another way, as I have proposed with this Saturn-Pluto Ceres Mercury-Sun alignment, square Eris and square Haumea, the midwife of the gods, is to use it as a creative tool where you can set an agenda and envision something, where we can work together and set an agenda and envision something. And the third way to use astrology is as a kind of a spiritual growth checkpoint, where you can mark your progress in certain ways, where you can look back at what your life was at a certain time and what it's become now, and by that logic, where you might want to be. I think the predictive element of astrology is almost entirely misguided because of the well-known creative potential of the human mind. In addition, we live in a kind of a polyverse where we're living simultaneously in the midst of a bunch of what you might think of as potential realities, and we navigate our way through those potential realities. And so rather than pointing to any one thing, I believe that astrology points to a diversity of possibilities and contains instructions for what we might do to be able to guide our choices among those potential or probable realities. All right, this is my basic introduction to Saturn, working away on the art of becoming. Please keep listening. Well, the next video here will be about Chiron. That may have to be in two parts. Who knows? Maybe I'll be able to condense it into into one video. That'll be followed by a video on Uranus entering Taurus, and then finally I'm planning on doing one on additional minor planet activity. That may be woven into the Chiron one, but we'll see. They're all related. Just to give you a little preview of what is going on, right here in early Capricorn, Saturn is right there right now, and conjunct Saturn are a number of other points, one of them being Quaoar, about family matters, and then another being Pholus, which is about to enter Capricorn sometime this week. That too being about family matters, and what is so absolutely interesting and kind of a reward of studying the minor planets is to note that in the first degree of Aries, on the Aries point, I've marked it with a little S here. There's a planet called Salacia, which is the root of the word salacious, meaning kind of sexually scandalous, and it was with Salacia on the Aries point through much of 2017 that we experienced a lot of salacious stories in the form of these debunkings of sexually inappropriate activity. But what we're about to find out is how much this involves the family. And interestingly, with Quaoar, the planet of family patterns, squares Salacia, we were treated yesterday to the release of a book about the internal goings-on of the Trump White House, full of all kinds of salacious stories. That's more for a discussion for Planet Waves FM. All right, thanks for tuning in. Thank you for being a customer of the art of becoming. I'm going to close up the video shop and continue writing that project. Still looking at January delivery. Thanks for your patience on that, and lots of love. And keep in touch.